welcome back to an Ode to Birth podcast. So happy to have Lizzy Morris here with us on Instagram. She is at Lizzy Morris, and she's also started the Womanhood Project. That is WOMBANHOOD Project. Lizzy, thank you. You're a badass in the birth space.
Thank you.
You're a badass in advocating for families and women that are looking for autonomous and sovereign birth experiences. And this is my jam, is what I'm all about. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I haven't shared my third birth story like super openly on my podcast or anywhere else. And so, but when you reached out to me and you're like, hey, like, I love your vibes. You want to be on? I was like, you know what? Yeah, it just felt right. So I'm really excited to be here today and to talk all the things.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel as though your story is so inspiring for women. And I also have a burning question that I think is going to catapult us into a really interesting conversation. And this first question is, like, what is it about birthing in our modern day culture that just is really bothering you right now?
So there's so many things, but a theme, there's a theme, amongst my story. I mean, the thousands of stories you just read on the internet, the women you talk to, and then even in our media, so a part of the culture in movies and all the ways that we talk about birth, our birth stories, there is a underlying theme of making decisions from external forces. So I actually just watched a video on this, and hopefully I can explain it very simply. But it was talking about what motivates our choices. And it was saying when we use language like, I have to do this, or I need to do this, or I should do this, we see this in birth stories all the time. You hear this more than you hear I'm going to, or I did this, where when you use that first set of language, like I should, or I need to, it's understood that we are making those choices in that language based on an external factor, like someone else, what they think of us, just other external forces, rather than us wanting to make an autonomous choice to, like, I'm going to get induced versus I need to, or I should, or things like that. And I've just really been digging into not like psychology in a real scientific, like college, type way, where I'm like looking up definitions and trying to be super, perfect about it. But I really am trying to understand, why we make the choices we do. And so the underlying theme that I see is that bothers me is us women. It's just subconsciously ingrained in us that we will make decisions based on how we will be viewed in our community, how will we be judged in our community based on these decisions we make in our birth. And I can wholeheartedly say for my experience that was the driver for my first two births. I was too scared to make decisions out of the integrity of what felt right in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I don't know if that made any sense. I hope, like, maybe as we talk, it'll make more sense. But I'm a real freak about language, because I realized how much power we give over when we say those things, and how I can look back at posts I made in Facebook groups being like, I think my midwife is going to bait and switch me, and like the things I would say. And I'm like, I think it's things we need to address so we can take back the power over ourselves. So yeah, I don't know
It's
if that
so
made any sense.
true. It's so true, Lizzy. Our words are wands. Like, our words are literally casting spells into
Yes.
the ethers, right? And I would agree with you there. I mean, well, not only are medical care professionals in the birth space abiding by rules and regulations and a scope of practice, they have to work within certain parameters and would expect you to oblige to those parameters. And so anything that's out of the range of normal, or what we would consider normal, any sort of deviation from their standard operating procedures, they freak out, right? They're worried about litigation because they only want to work on their turf. And so I would agree with you. There's a certain agenda that they have. We have to work within our scope of practice. And if you're not going to work with us, then you're the bad guy, right? Because we don't want to look like the bad guy. And so you're right. There's a lot of coercion and manipulation that happens in the maternity wards. And I've seen it firsthand as a birth doula, birth attendant. It's just like, I'm just there and I'm
Mhm.
seeing something go down and it doesn't feel right. And this woman, like you said, is out of power. She's not able to speak for herself because we've been groomed to feel like we have to oblige to what this person in the white coat is saying. Right.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
think groomed is the would have been a really easy word for me to wrap that up. Yes, is the conditioning. We're just conditioned. I mean, and I understand it. Once you get so deep into it, it's so obvious. It just you can see it so clearly how it's came to be and how women have always been treated and how it shifts from one way to another, as far as being discriminized or stripped of our authority. But yeah, the grooming. Every time I see a birth scene in a show, like I have a show I love, and then some birth thing will pop up. I'm like, you ruined it. You ruined. But I'm trying to like get past that because I'm like, okay, I will never enjoy anything again if I get too deep like that. But yeah, it's everywhere. It's nonstop. So
Right. We
yeah.
have to, it's almost like, society's very much, especially in Western North American culture, we've been conditioned to believe that birth is a medical emergency. Right. And here we are, you and I, doing this work to bring light and the truth into our society and remind women, like, no, you actually have choice in the matter. You're allowed to birth however you want with whoever you want there. Um, you made a post recently, and okay, I'm not, for anybody listening, I'm not trying to villainize regulated midwifery. I'm not against medical midwives. There's a time and a place, and they can do some amazing work within the system supporting families. Um, but you made a post recently, Lizzy, that I'd love to elaborate on. And you said that midwifery is not the answer. So could you please kind of share what you mean by this?
Yeah. I constantly see in the home birth, natural birth, whatever. There's so many terms we've all come up with now. I mean, even in obstetrics, I follow some OBGYNs and you constantly hear that midwifery is the answer, and people will often reference how midwives used, community midwives used to take care of everybody, and we all birthed with all of our mothers around. And I'm just going to speak from my biased experience because I've had some pretty traumatic experience, so I understand that my viewpoint is not aligned with everybody, and I'm not speaking for everybody. But when I say midwifery is not the answer, I feel like um, prior to the mid 1900s, we weren't having the best birth outcomes because we weren't practicing hand washing and things like that. And so the scope of what midwifery was prior, I'm not saying it was completely flawed. I just think what it was before, which I know most of that was like doctors and things and whatever, without getting into the history of birth, I think we can't even go off what it was before because even then we were still being controlled by men. We couldn't vote. We couldn't do all these things. And so I think even trying to compare, oh, we used to do this in midwifery and like that's what we need to get back to. I don't think that's the answer, A. And then going into what we see now when people say, midwifery is the answer to all the maternal health care. Well, I don't have all the statistics, but I've listened to a lot of stories, and the opinion I've formulated is you can look at the UK or all these different places and see where midwifery is just failing because it is now controlled by obstetrics.
Mhm.
And so, you know, I don't have the answer. Um, but a lot of people try to think about how can we fix the system from the inside out, and midwifery is in the system. I don't think we can change the system, and I don't want to be pessimistic, but I have been hurt in my own stories by obstetrics and midwifery. And so I see the regulations they have. I see who they have to answer to. And they're groomed and conditioned to see everything. It's so different than it was even 20 years ago. So different in midwifery, in my opinion. So that's kind of what I mean is I hear it constantly, like midwifery is the answer to all of our problems. And that puts a lot of pressure on midwives. That's not
Mhm.
okay either. I don't think it's okay. Like, I'm not anti-midwife. Like you said, I'm not anti-midwife whatsoever. I think it's not fair on just to give OBs and midwives some compassion, because I do have compassion for them. It's not fair to put all this pressure. Like, you're going to be the answer to all these, things that are we're struggling. That's not okay. I think the answer, I should have made a post follow up to that. Maybe I will now. I think the answer is us taking ownership of our choices, which, is really hard to navigate considering all the, you know, wealth of information we have to access on what can we do, what should we do, what could go wrong. We know so many more things that can go wrong at birth these days, even if it's a 1 in a million chance.
Mhm.
Um, because we have stories pop up on, TLC, the baby shows that they used to have, like, I didn't know I was pregnant, and and I don't think they're all bad. Anyway, so I'm getting off topic. I'm kind of think I'm delving far into it, but
Well, I totally agree with you. Registered midwives, right? They're an extension of medical obstetrics, and obstetricians are surgeons, right? So they're trained in performing surgery, specifically major abdominal surgery, which is the cesarean section, and they're trained in saving lives, and they are not trained in the natural physiology of birth, and so, therefore, neither are registered or regulated midwives. They're not trained in natural physiological childbirth. They're trained to look at what could go wrong in these anomaly situations that you're speaking to,
mhm.
and the 1 in a million chance. That's what their focus is on, which really takes up a lot of space in the birth room. And what I'm hearing from you, and it sounds like through the birth of your third child, it took time for you to tune into that realization where it was like, oh my gosh, the birth isn't about them. It shouldn't be about them and their fear. This is actually about me and me making choices for my body and for my family and for this baby that I'm intuitively connected to. Right. So I'd love for you to jump into your story. I don't know if you want to get into the trauma from the first and second birth, but maybe that can give us some context into how you came around to this realization and to stepping into your power, Lizzy.
Yes. Oh, so I still haven't completely found a way to get my story super concise without going into I'm a very detailed person, if you can't tell. But I'll try to, for time's sake, so we can get to the third part, because I think that is where, when we see the transformation is the most important. Oh my gosh, and off topic, my stepfather is cutting grass right now. So if that becomes something you hear in the background, please let me know. Like, I will move locations, but I did not expect him to be doing that. So hopefully it doesn't make
I'll
noise.
let you know if it's coming in, but we shouldn't be able to hear it.
Okay. So my first, to give a context and background, I was only 22 when I got pregnant with my first child. I had him when I was 23. But I had actually went through infertility for 2 years to get pregnant with him. A lot of this, I think, has to do with some health factors. I did work on my health a lot through those few years. But before that, I actually had a Mirena IUD that became embedded in my uterine wall, and I had to get that surgically removed. And that's when I immediately began trying to conceive. And so, crazy background. I've done birth control. I had terrible experiences with all of them, but, I've just always been in, like, honestly, throughout my life, just, in and out of this healthcare system, um, with my womb. And it was crazy because the man that took my IUD, I loved him. He would call it my womb. He was the only doctor that ever called it the womb. And I used to think it was kind of weird when I was like 20, 21. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, I love him even more. Just, oh, no one calls it that. So anyway, but I, uh, I found out I was pregnant, and I've been working on my health, but I'll tell you, I'm plus size, and I have really realized how much internalized fat phobia I have towards myself still to this day. And when I became pregnant, I had lost about 50 pounds, and but I, again, just a plus size woman. And I remember thinking, I had watched free, I didn't realize this at the time, but I was watching free birth videos. There was a Facebook group called BirthTube. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it. I can't get back in the group and it makes me so sad, but women would post birth videos all the time. So I would watch this stuff all the time when I was trying to conceive. But I remember I didn't see many women my size probably. And I just remember thinking like, I can't have a home birth, but I would watch women birth in RVs, all kinds of stuff. I just remember all these videos, and so I just admitted myself. Like I just said, no, there's no way I could do that. Like no one's going to support me. It's just not something I can do. And that's when I immediately just handed over pretty
Hmm.
much everything. So that was during COVID that I got pregnant in January of 2020. And so then, all hell broke loose. And I started having like higher blood pressure readings closer to like the third trimester. And I guess due to like risk factors, although I was never given like a conversation, I was never set down like, hey, you know how it goes. There's no dialogue on what's really going on or what's happening. And I think I researched some stuff. I was like, well, let me try the brewer's diet, and I tried that and it made me sick. And then I just was like, this is just too hard. I'm just going to take the medication the doctor gave me. And, life was so stressful. I remember going to the grocery store and having panic attacks, having to wear a mask, like never having panic attacks on a regular basis to having panic attacks, like just going grocery shopping. It was just a lot was going on. And so I just think life felt too stressful to even try. And so I just went with the punches. I was going to biophysical profiles, NSTs, tons like 24-hour urine testing to try to see if I had preeclampsia. I never had swelling. All the tests came back negative. My baby was always fine. Um, the blood pressure, I to this day not really sure if it was because it was those digital cuffs that, and I have a really big arm and you need to change out the cuffs for that, or whatever, because my blood pressure was great during the hospital stay and my blood pressure was always great during my NSTs. But every time I would go to that OB/GYN appointment, it was high. And there's
Hmm.
also white coat syndrome, so whoever knows. But I had not seen my OB/GYN for a couple of weeks, and I go to, cause she was at birth. And so I would go to my appointments and she wasn't there. And I was like 34 weeks and she's like, so we're going to induce at 37 weeks. And I just remember first of all, the first time my motherly intuition screamed so loud at me, will never forget the feeling. And I just, she's going to C-section you. She's going to C-section you. She's going to C-section you. That's all I could hear. And I liked this doctor. She had a good personality, but that's all I felt in my mind. And I just sobbed because I didn't want to be induced. I thought I was silly old me. I thought I was going to go to like 42 weeks because that's how far my mom went with all of us. And so I'm like, I have like 9 weeks or something, 8 weeks left, but no, she's telling me I have like so 2.5, something like that. Um, and yeah, I didn't know. I don't want to say I didn't know any better. I just surrendered, I guess. So I went to the induction and it was the full cascade of interventions, which I had no clue about at the time. Um, but if anyone knows, you could just Google it because it's exactly what it is. I don't even have to tell you my birth story for you to understand that. And then what ended up leading to my C-section was failure to progress. My baby never had a heart rate dip or anything like that. Like he was fine, I was fine, but I just didn't get past 6 centimeters, after like 2 or 3 days or something crazy like that. So I remember being on the table and knowing I was going to have a VBAC. Like I never wanted to do that again. It was probably one of the loneliest moments of my entire life, even though there was a room full of people. Um, I remember trying to talk and feeling like nobody was listening to me. And then they take my baby. He was totally fine. Nothing was wrong with him, but I don't know what's going on. I don't know anything about all this stuff. So they show me him for a second and then they take him away for the next 3 hours. So when they whisk him away, I tell my husband, like, go, watch him, like, just make sure. And you hear that so many times in stories. It's so sad. Like, just telling the one person and to just go because you don't know where they're taking your baby. And not that you think they're going to do something wrong, but it was just terrifying. And I didn't see him for 3 hours. So there was a lot of things that happened in the hospital. Like he ended up getting jaundice. And there was like 24 hours where I could only hold him when it was time to feed him, and he was naked and it was so cold. And like the Billy lights they didn't have a Billy blanket. And so he was under these lights with no blanket. And I just felt like I just cried and I couldn't get up, you know. And I don't know, that was the first time. My next experience was pretty rough too, but that was the first time that I really felt like I, everything I once knew about my life was just ripped away. Like the curtain to everything else was unveiled. Like it just dropped. Um, to see everything else, the injustices of everything, like outside of birth, you know, I don't know, it just changed me. So
It
to go
makes a
into my
lot of
second,
sense. Sorry, I'll
yeah,
just say like that
no, you're
really
fine.
makes a lot of sense. And I really want to honor you and just like bow down to the fact that you did go through probably one of the most traumatic experiences that a woman could go through. This is like hitting rock bottom. Of course, you're contemplating everything and seeing all of it because you're on the edge. You're in the most liminal space and then getting taken advantage of and feeling completely helpless. Like I totally see you in that. And I'm so sorry that that happened for your first experience in giving birth, Lizzy.
Thank you, Madison. I appreciate that. And it kills me knowing like right now that's happening to so many other women. I try not to like think about that, but sometimes it comes up and I'm like, it's so rough. Now the one thing I was really proud of myself that I did research and when I was pregnant, I actually did research everything about the newborn stuff. You know, we don't this is our thing. We don't vaccinate, we don't circumcise, we don't didn't do the well, we didn't do the Hep B. We chose to decline the vitamin K, but we were coerced by 3 different pediatricians. And then I was scared they were going to call CPS. So then we did give him the vitamin K, and he actually had like some kind of seizure activity that night. His whole body locked up. Gosh, there's so many things about the story that I could go into. And it was just, I remember screaming. My husband was so tired. Like I was screaming to the top of my lungs, and he just could not wake up. And then I couldn't reach the nurse button because I'm trying to like my newborn is like a plank of wood. Like, and I remember knowing, I don't care what anyone says about vitamin K, that's not the point. Um, I just remember thinking I knew I didn't want to give him that. And I did
Mhm.
because, and I just remember thinking that's what caused that from him. But yeah, so I thought going into it, once I started delving into, you know, it took me a long time to look into VBAC or gosh, you know, triggering to see posts on Facebook or even to see someone have a C-section or a repeat C-section. All that stuff was anything, it was hard. But it definitely got to a point where I would follow some accounts and I would see midwifery is the answer, you know? And so I said, okay, the one thing I would always say to my friends and my husband, I said, I do not care if no one supports me. I will birth my baby in my backyard, my next child. Um, I totally was lying to myself. Not the third baby, that was true. That was so true to the core, but not my second. I thought that's what I would do. But I found myself, even though we tried to conceive for our first, after the C-section, I knew I wanted more kids, but I was like, I gotta wait 9 months. You know, that's the only way someone would ever support me. Because you have to see, look, that's that language stuff. You have to have 18 months in between births or whatever they say.
Well,
Um,
that's the rule in order for you to have a midwife supporting your file.
births, right.
Your chart, like you have to have had 18 months since your cesarean. Okay, so that's how it works in the States. Okay.
Well, no, some places it's 18 months since you have this. I mean,
Mhm.
most of it now is like the births have to be 18 months apart. So like you have to be 9 months postpartum to get pregnant, or 10 months would be probably the easier way. And so that's where I was at. Like, and it just worked out. I mean, I think once we got to like 9 months, I mean, I was obviously content with my child, but like I definitely desired that vaginal birth. So I think subconsciously we kind of conceived, I don't want to say accidentally, like, you know, whatever, but it wasn't purposeful. It wasn't a purposeful conception the same way my first was. But I did find myself pregnant like 9 or 10, 11, something just before he was a year old. And the difference between, well, I hired the midwife actually immediately. So I went and I had a friend that had a home birth locally. There's only one home birth midwife, but So I hired her at like 5 weeks. But then I got really sick and I was sick the whole pregnancy. I had HD the entire pregnancy, which I didn't have with my first. I was a little nauseous on and off the whole time with my first, but this time it was just the constant throwing up, constant being sick. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Whew, that humbled me too. That is so pregnancy humbled me so much. And birth. But so I actually don't see, and we were also trying to move. So I lived in South Carolina at the time, which midwives legally cannot attend a home birth VBAC. But we were right on the border, so we moved to Georgia, back to Georgia, because we had been here before, so she could attend my birth. So I kept pushing my appointments off for like a bunch of reasons, being sick and whatever. So I actually didn't see, from 5 weeks, I didn't see the midwife until I was like 18 weeks, or something like that. So, and at the time, I mean, maybe what details I've learned really don't matter as far as like, did she not, whatever. I will say the theme within this pregnancy, terrible communication. I think we really just, because I'm going to go on a deep dive and you can interrupt me at any time. But there were so many things. So I just want to say, like, I'm really getting to a point where I don't want to hate her anymore. Like, I'm really trying to work through forgiveness for me. And I've never understood forgiveness for me until now as well.
Mhm.
And so anyway, just, we weren't meant for each other. And I do think she's a midwife and I don't like her and whatever. But long story short, not long story short, but she had a student midwife, but I didn't know that when I interviewed her, it was just her at her house. And I go to my start going to my appointments and the student midwife's there, and I just, again, this undertone of like we give our authority over. Um, I just assume everything that just kind of happens for the most part. There's times where I like ask questions and say things, but I just kind of like just go with the flow. I don't, and there's nothing wrong with the student midwife particularly. It's just that just was the cascade of like, I didn't know we were gonna have another person in the room doing this. I hired you. Like
Right.
I remember, and so throughout the time, I didn't have, I might have had the high blood pressure or whatever in my first pregnancy, which is what I was concerned about going to them. I would tell them like, this is what I'm scared about. So they would like have me hold my arm and she would do the manual cuff and all that. My blood pressure was always like not even low, but lower than average. Like it was amazing. So that was great. But so I'm over here thinking like that's the only thing I got to worry about. Well, what starts to come up with, and I don't know, you start doing like gestational diabetes stuff like 20, 26 weeks, something like that. And so like 2 months after I start going to these appointments, and I already wasn't feeling good. Like the vibes were off. And that's why I say
Mhm.
there was always a theme of like, we were not meant for each other. And I wish I would have just listened to that feeling. But I thought the right thing to do was to hire a midwife. Like I thought that's the right thing to do. That's what we're supposed to do to be a good girl. So I was still submitting in many ways to this culture or whatever. But I I decided instead of I was like so terrified to take the gestational diabetes test because I was like, if I fail that, like, I understand with like home birth midwifery, it's like if you fail one thing, like they gotta like send you off, or if one thing's off, or I don't know, and you'll see midwives smudge numbers and stuff. But so I was like, okay, I don't want to take the test in case it's off by one number or 1 point. That would be so stupid. So I was like, let's just take my blood sugars at home. And this is when all things went down, and I feel like I very much am recognizing of like being a plus size woman and what that entails, and like I've experienced fat phobia, but I also know like how I take care of myself and how I've lost 100 pounds and all these things. And I would go to appointments telling them that because I would try to like give them the impression like I'm someone you can trust. Like I've
Right.
lost weight, like I do this, and it would never be good enough. Like, and it would, if I told them how much water I drank, it'd always be like, okay, well, you definitely need to drink more, you need to do this, or and I don't even say that to nitpick. It just always felt like I was like never enough for them. And so when the gestational diabetes stuff came up, all my readings were great. Like my fasting was great. My after meals were even lower than most people's because I knew I had read Lily. I don't even remember her last
Lily
name. Lily
Nichols.
Nichols.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah. I read all the books. Like I was always checking books out of her library. And so I read how to eat to lower your glucose. You eat fiber first. You like I know I'm not a genius, but I know basic things. So I was eating great. And this was so crazy. I went to Mexican with my family one night. And like this is how when you know all these little details, that's how like it just sticks with you. It's so stupid. But we went to Mexican, and while I was doing all this logging stuff, and the next day my fasting was like 105. And I think anything over 95, like they were all under 95 prior to this. But I guess the Mexican just really did something for me. And not she didn't say anything about like, oh, you have gestational diabetes, or you have this, or this is what we're gonna do, or whatever. I remember showing her that and saying, oh, no more Mexican for you. And it was just like, whatever. But the reason I bring that up is because they kept asking me, they never said I had gestational diabetes. They never said anything. Like I would have known. Like you know what I'm saying? Like, but this comes up later. I'm gonna try to get concise with the details and just move forward to bigger parts of the story. But um they wanted me to keep making a food log for like the rest of my pregnancy. And that was so just exhausting and so stupid. And I ate the same things every day. And egg, like I had HG. I was eating an egg sandwich and like chicken nuggets, but I would eat it in like a big salad with vegetables, and that was basically it, you know. Um but anyway, so it got to a point where I was like faking my food logs. Like I'll admit that now, because I was like, and I would feel like when I went to an appointment, I felt like I was going to get graded, like a kid going to school. And I know part of that is me, like totally. There's a part that like I would come in with that, you know, in me, like ready to defend myself, or ready to like, here's my paper. It didn't feel like this was someone or people caring about what I'm eating. It just felt gross. I just didn't like it. It felt stupid. It felt like wasting our time. Like, what are you just trying to look for something? Because then what comes up, I get my anatomy scan, everything's fine, which that's before the gestational stuff. But there was a point where my fun this is probably why they were getting me to keep taking it. I forgot my fundal height was measuring 6 centimeters ahead. I never thought fundal height would ever be an issue for me, because my first OBGYN never measured my fundal height. I was getting ultrasound so often, I guess, is so she never measured my fundal height. So my fundal height measures ahead, and they're like, well, now you gotta go get an ultrasound. And I remember that it was like right around 34 weeks, the
Mm.
same time I had that conversation with that OBGYN about all that bull crap. And I remember the same thing happening, just breaking down in their office, just being like, dude, like what? Like what? So I begged them to wait one more appointment to see what the fundal height looked like. Um, and if it was doing okay or whatever. And so we wait. And I don't know if I was going weekly or whatever, but I go again, and it was still measuring 6 centimeters ahead. I mean, as if I'm not 280 pounds and like a bunch of loose skin. And like, I think fundal height is so stupid. And I know I'm not trying to like sound all whatever, but I think it is so silly. It's the silliest thing to expect all women's stomachs to measure the same when we know all babies come out different sizes. There's no logic, in my opinion. That is me being angry. So they basically sent me to an MFM, and I just remember telling them like, well, if I decline this, are you going to not come to my birth? And that was basically, yeah, we're not going to be able to come. So I go
So
get
they're like
another.
gaslit. So again, so they're like coercing you to go to MFM. And if you don't play by the rules, then they're just going to drop you, and then you're having to be stranded.
Yeah. And this is why I tell women, I think no matter if you hire a midwife or hire an OB, you should always prepare for unassisted birth. Not that I recommend people just do it at the last minute. That's why you should always prepare for it just in case, because it's not fair to ever strip your rights and your body to someone else's career.
Mhm.
That's the secondary to rape, but they're making money off of it. And so with that being said, can you go? I'm on a call, please. Um, I we'll probably have to edit that out. I'm sorry. All right. Um, let me get my mind back.
Yeah, so they were like coercing you into MFM. So did you end up
Yeah.
going? Yeah, and then
Yeah,
right.
because I mean, at this point, like, there's so many factors that go into it. I understand why women don't want to fire somebody because I remember thinking I've already spent thousands of dollars. I
Mhm.
have, you know, just trust it, and you gaslight yourself, thinking there's no way, they're not going to do that to me. Like the things that end up coming up, like there's like, I would call my friends and I would make these posts in these homebirth groups, like, please tell me I'm just crazy. Like, please, like, there's no, whatever. It's not going to happen to me. And then you think that you have some kind of control over other people. I thought I had enough control over their actions that I could keep them from, you know, doing XYZ. But that is, especially during birth, what ends up happening is not the case. So yeah, so I go to the MFM appointment just because I'm thinking like, well, then and then I had a doula who would not attend a free birth. She made it very clear. And she was also actually I don't want to say in bed with the midwives. That sounds kind of fucked up, but like, language. But she was one of their birth support, like.
So she's playing good girl and she's people pleasing and making sure that she's doing her job, quote unquote, correctly, right? Yeah.
So, because this comes up later as well, but I liked the doula, but she was their like extra help that would come on afterwards to like help clean up births and stuff. That was not her role in my birth, by the way. I paid her $800 as a doula for my birth, but she was buddy buddies with the midwife, and that comes up later as well. But I remember begging the midwives to come to the appointment with me, and they said they wouldn't, but they would send, or they wouldn't send. They said, my doula could come. And I'm actually getting that part confused. So the first appointment was just an ultrasound to see if the baby was measuring big, which their trimester ultrasounds have been proven not to be accurate on baby size. So that, even I remember going in and thinking like, this is stupid. And also they were checking for like fluid levels because I guess they thought like I had way too much fluid or something, but everything came out fine. He got a full anatomy scan. I was not supposed to get an anatomy scan, but they gave me an anatomy scan. I remember her doing it on the table, and I remember asking her like, this is taking a lot longer than I thought. That we're just checking for like the weight and stuff. She's like, well, you've never been here before, so we have to do this. And I totally could have said, no, we
Hmm.
don't. I could, but I digressed. So that messes me up later because the midwives get the report back and it shows everything's great. Everything's great. I have the report myself. I didn't at the time, but I do now. And they they message me and they say like, oh, did you schedule the follow-up appointment? And I was like, no. And all it said was like, we just recommend you come back in 2 weeks to get an ultrasound because that's what MFMs do. But it said, everything measures right, everything's fine. A couple days later go by and they message me again because I was like, no, like I'm not going to schedule the appointment, everything's fine, right? And they're like, yeah, everything's fine. I was like, okay. And this is where it gets to be, to me, the constantness of like bringing up stuff, and like my blood sugars were still consistently fine, everything was fine, and it just felt like they were always trying to get me out of their way, like they wanted me gone. And I hate to, I don't want to feel like that, but it's too many things, right? So a couple days go by, they message me and say this whole paragraph. If I were to show you, you'd be like, oh my gosh. Where on the ultrasound, baby's heart, and keep in mind, I'm 36 weeks when I get this ultrasound. I've already had an anatomy scan. I'm plus size, which already makes all of that, being, third trimester, all of it makes the scan hard to read. But the high risk doctor said everything was fine. So they go in and it says like there was multiple organs that the doctor couldn't, or the ultrasound tech couldn't fully measure, which happens all the time. And so she was like, the baby's heart is measuring small, or like they couldn't see everything on the left. And so that could mean hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which is a deadly condition. Like that, if your baby has that, then they need to have surgery after birth, or a lot of times they die, and it's a terrible thing. And so
Hmm.
she goes into this whole thing like, it would be terrible if this happened at home birth. Like, I mean, it's a long message about hypoplastic left heart syndrome. And I did not respond for hours. And I broke down and I called my friend in Alaska who had a free birth later that year. And I just didn't, I was like, what is happening right now? And I think I've said that like 40 times on this podcast already, but you're just like, where's the cameras? Like, is this a joke? So they ba- they want me to go back to the doctor to make sure his heart's okay. And it was the day of my home visit. You know, at 37 weeks, you're supposed to get a home visit where they come to your house and you sit down and they get to see the space and you get to talk about your birth and all the emergency stuff. So they scheduled my day, the midwives. And keep in mind, they were the ones calling the MFMs. The MFM did not call that. They called the MFM all these times to schedule my appointments for me. It wasn't like the MFM was like, yeah, this girl needs to like whatever. Um, so I get to I submit. I say, okay. That's when I asked them, can you go to the appointment with me? And they said
Mhm.
no. They had other things to do, I guess. I don't know. Although I was on their schedule for that day, so it's just kind of
You've also
like that
paid
was,
them quite a lot of money.
yeah, that was like my home visit was that day. So I don't know. It feels the second stories actually hurt so much more because it's betrayal from people you think are gonna be there for you. The first doctor, while she was nice, I didn't know her. I spent hours with these women in her house, letting them touch my body. At one point, sticking their fingers in me many times. So it's very traumatic and it's not okay. But the doula comes with me that day. And thank God she did in a way, but whatever. It didn't really matter in the end, I guess. Because basically the doctor's like, yeah, they were like, why are you here today? And I remember knowing they were going to ask that. I remember thinking, they're not going to know why I'm here because everything was fine. We get there and they're like, yeah, why are you here today? I'm like, your guess is as good as mine. These midwives think something's wrong with my son's heart. And the MFM was like, no, his heart's okay, but I see you're a VBAC, and basically your baby's going to float in your abdomen and die. And I have that on audio. Um, so I knew they were going to say some stuff like that. So I recorded the whole appointment. And then another doctor comes in, the resident, and says the same thing. She says, we love Tolac, but we've seen babies floating in mom's abdomens. It's almost sounded like it was like something they rehearsed because they said the same exact thing. And I can imagine maybe it was one or two women in their whole career. And I can understand how traumatizing that is. But I was like, thankfully, I had read and researched enough about birth to know, like, you're not going to get me with that. I know birthing in the hospital for me, Pitocin scared, like, you're gonna get Pitocin in the hospital, and I refuse. Like, I was like, no, that's what's gonna rupture. Y'all are gonna rupture me. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
rupture at home. Like,
Yeah.
to this day, and although I did put myself in a situation where I could have been susceptible to Pitocin again, which was staying with those midwives, because what happens is they transfer me from my home birth. So
And for those listening, like when you're given Pitocin, which is the fake form of oxytocin, this drug is causing extremely intense cramping of the uterus. Like the uterus is hammering down on the baby to get out. And not only is that extremely painful, so most women end up with an epidural, which can lead to cesarean. Um, if you've had a cesarean, right, it is putting a lot of pressure on that scar. So that's what you're referring to, Lizzy, is like, yeah, if you'd been given Pitocin, then yeah, your risk of abruption goes way up. But they don't seem
yeah,
to
and
know that.
yeah, and I mean, even I don't know if you know who Katie Spinks is, not to go off topic, but real quick, if anyone wants to look up Katie Spinks on Instagram or TikTok, she was a fourth time mom, never had a cesarean and ruptured because of Pitocin in the hospital. So anyone should be aware, but definitely as a VBAC, every not every, I've seen two non-rupture stories and the thousands of rupture stories I've read that weren't Pitocin, but almost every rupture story I read had Pitocin, and it just breaks my heart because it's so many times they say they that's not what they wanted. So I just remember in that appointment, like, y'all are not going to get me. But secretly, it was the midwives that I had to worry about. So, not secretly, it was pretty overt. Her, but so the doula was like, she wasn't a VBAC herself. And so I think that even though she's a doula and she's in many settings, I think she had more of a limited scope, just as anyone would if you don't have that experience. I don't expect everyone to understand what it feels like to have had a cesarean, but she's like, oh my gosh, this was like the appointment was so crazy. Do you want me to call the midwives or you? And I'm like thinking, I didn't say this to her, but I'm thinking in my head, those midwives don't believe me. You call them. So she calls the midwives and it's like, yeah, they don't care about the heart. They just said she's gonna kill her baby. Like, and then I go to my midwife appointment again. Or so what we did for the home visit was like virtual. We just did it on Zoom, but um went over emergency protocols, which ended up happening in my birth. So just fast forward my fundal height measures ahead the whole time, the rest of the couple weeks. I get to 41 weeks. I'm trying to remember if there was anything else I missed. I feel like after that appointment, there was actually a couple weeks where it was more chill. And I think they said they felt bad. Like, so the next appointment, they're like, oh, like we feel so bad. And I think there might have been maybe a little bit that they did. But when I creeped up to 42 weeks, license, comes back up. That's where their brains are going to, is like, how can I protect my license? Because that's what they have to do. So I kind of knew I was going to go late. My mom, like I said, my mom did, and I didn't mind. Like, I was not scared of stillbirth after 42 weeks. And I've had two stillbirths in my family, which happened prior to 40 weeks. So I just don't know if that shifted. Like, I just was not scared to do it. I was fine going as long as possible, but I guess I really should have considered the fact that if I hit 42 weeks, it's over. So when I hit 41 weeks, we talked about all the induction things. And I don't know, later that week, did a membrane sweep. And then I did the midwife's brew twice, because the first time I threw up. And once I did it the second time, a couple hours later, it kicked me into active labor. And I was only in active labor for 12 hours, from like 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. to 9 a.m. the next day. But the secondary midwife is actually the one that was communicating with me the whole time, to the student midwife, even though, again, don't have much animosity towards her, because I think the main midwife's obviously the one like making the decisions and like teaching her what to say and what to do, because she's not, the secondary midwife is not registered yet. I think I was her last birth, actually. Or I might have that wrong. I don't know. I was one of her last few births, but she was the one that was texting me about the heart. She was the one that was doing all these things. Well, she ends up being the one that's at my birth like 99% of the time, her and my doula. And things were going fine. I mean, they were checking the heartbeat, they were doing the things like, I was going through it just great. But when I hit transition, it was like, so I had my son at 9:47 a.m. This was like 8 something, like late 8 o'clock in the morning. I remember coming out the bathroom and seeing that main midwife and being like, oh, you're here. Not like, oh, you're here. It was like, oh, you're here. You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember not liking seeing her face. And oh, it was just terrible. Like, I'm in full blown transition, like, and I remember, this is so stupid. I guess I have to give these details because it's so dumb. Um, she asked me to take my blood sugar in labor, in transition, and it was high. I can imagine, because I hadn't eaten 12 hours, because I'm literally about to push a baby
Yeah.
out. My adrenaline, my blood, everything. That's actually one of the things that still makes me want to email her, outside of all the other stuff, because I've never seen that. I have never seen, in all the craziness, someone, even at the hospital, them take someone's blood sugar in labor. Like, she was obviously so scared of something with my blood. Like, she was terrified of something. Um, and it was so high, and I remember thinking, it was like 136, which actually isn't like the most high, but I've never had, even to this day, like, I've never had a reading that high. Um, and I remember thinking, oh my God, like, she's freaking out. Like, I remember thinking about this woman. I'm about to push my baby out, and I'm like focusing on her reaction over here, watching, and she's looking in my fridge. She's looking, she's looking in my cabinets. And I remember I get told to go, when they would check the heartbeat, I was basically standing and like on my knees, on all fours, kind of on pillows, the whole labor. I could not sit. I like, sitting felt like terrible. Laying down felt terrible. It felt like my body was saying, get up or you're going to die. That is literally what it felt like when I would sit or lay down. But because of my stomach and my loose skin and my size, they could not get the heartbeat with me standing, because he's so low, you know. Um, and so they would make me lay down. I submitted to laying down. And even to this day, ladies, if you have a home birth midwife, I don't care if they say they have to take the heartbeat. They do not have to. They can put patient decline. Although you should just never hire people that has a problem with you declining things, But um, so the heart rate had been fine the whole time. But if we know what we know, is the pelvis, it closes by 30% or 60%, whatever they say, when you lay down. And so when
Most
that midwife
women are
gets,
tradition, so I'll just say, like, if
Mhm.
you go into the textbooks and see our ancestors birthing and look at the hieroglyphics of women, big, beautiful women pushing their babies out of their bodies. They're upright. They're holding
Mhm.
onto a tree. They're holding
Yeah.
on to something to have their bodies upright and using gravity. Every mammal is using gravity to get that little baby out of their body. Yeah. So
Mhm.
to be on your side and sitting down is excruciatingly painful and going against the physiology of birth. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and so all this comes into context because while his heart rate had been fine the whole time, and I'm actually really, for myself, I'm anti-fetal monitoring because I've done the research on it because of this scenario, and it actually does not improve outcomes. Even intermittent auscultation does not improve outcomes the way they think it does. So that's my beef with it. But I lay down, and his heart rate had been fine the whole time, but this is when he had some dips. I looked back, my doula had like, she wrote like a birth story outline from the details of my birth, not like super detailed, but in that, whatever, it says I experienced 2 contractions with dips, and that's when the midwife made the call. And I just read that the other day. Because I was wondering, I was like, how long did she tolerate? She tolerated me for 2 contractions and left, and called the ambulance while we were filling up the birth tub. And I remember saying, "Can I get in the tub before the," like, I still was asking permission constantly. I said, "Can I get in the tub before the ambulance get here?" And they're like, "No." And so the ambulance gets there. I get myself on the gurney, and I have to, oh, it was just, I'll fast forward to this because that was one of the most traumatic parts too, was like, the one thing I didn't want to have to do for 12 hours, I wasn't doing. Now for the next 20 minutes on the ride to the hospital, I'm strapped down on my back. And I remember pulling myself, like, because you're like, my arms are down, but I would try to like pull my body up, and they're asking me questions and are trying to poke me with a needle. And I just, yeah, it was not okay. And so we get to the hospital, and by my lucky stars, if it was any other doctor, if I didn't purple push for the life of me naked in front of like 20, 30 people once again for the second time within a year and a half, stranger having to stick their fingers in me to check if I was complete. I got an ultrasound in the hospital, like right there in the labor room, to make sure he wasn't breech. And I remember screaming at them, "He's head down." So I had people putting their fingers in me, putting the stomach things on me, doing the ultrasound, asking to get the needle on my arm. The epidural guy, anesthesiologist, was like, "Do you want an epidural today?" And I remember being like, grunting because I was having to talk through contractions and just having to answer to all these people. Like, it was just crazy. I remember telling him there's not enough time, and they're screaming, screaming, and I pushed him out on my back, and had a second-degree tear internally, really deep, and I tore up to my urethra. And while I mean, I'm glad I got a vaginal birth, but that all, just to the C-section, just opened my eyes to a whole new world. And the recovery, while it was so much better than a C-section, again, it was, first off, the mental recovery still to this day. Like, the C-section does not bother me the same way that it really doesn't. Um, I still have to just try to work through it all the time. It felt like, I remember, now that I've had my daughter, because I'm obviously, like, we'll talk and I want to get to the next part too, but there's a part when the baby exits the womb that it feels like, because I experienced with my daughter, I know it may or may not have been the people touching me, but it feels like someone's touching you. Like, and I think it's like their feet and stuff coming out. But like, because I remember yelling at my husband in my third birth, like, "Don't touch me." He's like, "I'm not touching you." And I have footage. He was not touching me. But I remember in that, which in my second birth, people obviously were touching me, but I remember feeling like people were like touching me down there, like while he was emerging out, which again, they probably were, but I was screaming, "What are y'all doing to me?" That was the words that came out of my mouth. Like, "What are y'all doing to me?" You know? And I just like, it's hard not to, I mean, PTSD is very real. And the replaying of, oh, and the midwife even saying, like, the day before she did the membrane sweep, "We don't play about VBACs, right?" That's engraved in my mind. Like, all these little things that I tattooed in me. And I don't try to say that as like a, woe is me. And I know we don't minimize birth trauma or anything. It's just, it's hard. I
Mhm.
still think about it. Um, and then the secondary midwife came with me in the ambulance. Because I guess that was her job to keep records or whatever. But the main midwife never came and saw me at the hospital.
Mm.
And not only that, she didn't text me, didn't call me. And not only that, she kept my doula behind for an extra like 15 minutes to help her empty up the tub. And that's why I brought up, I hired the doula while they had a work relationship. I hired the doula for me, and the doula she should not have had the doula stay behind to empty the tub.
No.
Like, what if I went in for a C-section? And not even that. So the doula missed my birth. And I never asked for money back or anything like that because it wasn't about that. But that was not okay either, to keep my doula behind. And then for the main midwife to never come to the hospital. So it felt very much like I was just abandoned. Like I was like, they got what they wanted. I'm out of their hair now. I didn't get, they didn't do any of the weighing. I've seen midwives come back to the house, days after a transfer and do like the weighing and all the fun. No, I got none of that.
Mm.
So yeah. Anyway, that was that story. I don't know if you have anything you want to say, or if I should move forward to the next one.
Yeah,
But
I mean, I feel as though it's like what you're sharing here is so raw and so vulnerable and very traumatic. And for those listening, like I know it sounds daunting, but this is the reality for so many women, for the majority of women in
yeah,
North America. Like this is the unfortunately is the classic cascade of intervention that happens to women. And this is why we're doing the work that we're doing. And I really appreciate you sharing your story, Lizzy, because it's not easy to be like, yeah, this really messed up shit happened to me. And unfortunately, this is the norm. So, what can we do to shift it? Well, we reclaim our power, we call our power back, we step into a place of fully trusting in the physiology of birth and trusting in like what we're capable of as women and letting go of the people who have an agenda for us, right? So I'm assuming now as we roll into the story of your third baby, you probably didn't hire anybody aside from a wise woman or someone. Yeah. So tell me who you had
yeah,
in your space and what happens here.
yeah. So after that, I was just so messed up for a good while, like really, really, really messed up. But what happened into like it messed up my marriage. And that comes, I mentioned that because it'll play a big role in the third birth. But so I actually, again, it was like an accidental pregnancy, but that's not accidental. But truthfully, I really was not, I totally wasn't expecting it, because I conceived my sons on like ovulation, and it makes total sense. But she was conceived. So I had a daughter for my third, and she was conceived, or like whatever, like almost a week prior to ovulation. Like it was so, I always thought she was a girl the whole time, because I was like, I know female swimmers are like, they last longer and I was like, it's got it. But I didn't want to get my hopes up, because I was like, I don't even know how I got pregnant. But then I took antibiotics the next week because I was sick, and antibiotics, they use an IVF to actually help implant. I don't know what about, and antibiotics also cancel out birth control, which I wasn't on. But it just like, I'm like, I think all these little points make sense on how I got pregnant. But I was thinking me and my husband were about done. Like I was traveling to and from my mom's constantly, as far as like, um, I just couldn't, it was hard to be a mom. It was hard to do all these things. And so we were not getting along great. I felt like we were about to, I guess, divorce. I don't know what I was thinking. And then I get pregnant. And that's why I was like, we literally had sex like one time. It was crazy. It was meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I was sick again the whole pregnancy, but it was so bad the first few weeks because I had these two kids. So I actually got pregnant again like 9 months later, 10 months later. It was the exact same pattern. Um, and so I had these two, like my oldest was like 2.5, and my youngest had just not even one when I first got pregnant yet. So I I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I don't know how you or anyone else feels about pregnancy release or termination, but I was so sick, and I was like, I don't even know. I had not processed, or work through the birth trauma in the way that I needed to. And I just remember not wanting to have to go through that. And like also not knowing how I was going to take care of my kids, because I ended up being so sick that I constantly felt like I was about to pass out. And I went to the hospital one day because I told my husband, I was like, at this point, I'm actually kind of scared it's ectopic, like, because I was so dizzy. And I remember
Right.
I didn't have blood or anything, but I couldn't eat. I couldn't do anything. I just was non-functioning. And I remember crying and just like, just not knowing what to do with my life. At this point, I just thought, this is the end. Like, that's what it really felt like. I'm laughing now, but it felt like it at the time. But I go to the hospital and I get a couple bags of IV fluids. I get some medicine, all the things. They did an ultrasound, and that was the only intervention or, procedure, ultrasound, whatever that I had. The rest of the pregnancy, I never did anything else, as far as that. But she was fine. Everything was fine. And this sounds terrible, but since I'm already being real and raw, and I've always I'm like, I hate that I even felt this way for like a split second, but I almost wanted something to be wrong just so I had like an excuse not to go through that again. And I was like, please God, no, like don't let anything bad happen to her. Like once I found out she was okay, I was like, oh, I feel so terrible that I thought that. But I was like, I just don't, you know, it pushes you into like survival mode if you're not able to function. So I still was grappling on what I was going to do regardless. And I just decided, I live in Georgia. So the abortion laws, it was just scary. Like I was scared if I decided to get one and something happened, no one would save me. Um, and all these different things. So I said, well, probably staying pregnant is probably the safest thing. Even though I feel terrible, I think I can handle this more than the thought of like something happening to me ending my pregnancy. And yeah, that was the beginning of it. And obviously, I carried a lot of shame. I had 3 kids in 3 years. Even though I went through infertility to get the first one, I'm like, I feel like everyone looks at me like I'm complaining about my births and like I'm not getting like, you know what I mean? I think that's why a lot of women don't like talking about it, because you don't want to be looked at as like ungrateful, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I was like, I just don't even know what I'm going to do. So I just decided not to tell anybody about my pregnancy. I did not tell my mom. I mean, my husband knew. And I mean, my friends knew. I have a lot of virtual people that like live in other states that I can trust, that respect my decisions, that respect me. Because obviously even me sharing that is something I haven't shared with many people. But I I knew I was going to go unassisted. I mean, I had talked to some midwives. Like there's one that lives like maybe 2.5 hours from me. That's honestly, she seems amazing. But I came to a place after doing so much reflection. I mean, I constantly was thinking about birth. I mean, I was reading books 24/7 when I could, outside of like kids and being sick and all the things, podcasts, books, any documentaries, all over again, all the things, constantly just feeding my mind full of birth stuff and what I want to prepare for and what I want to think about and all the decisions I have to go through in my mind. And I remember when I decided not to hire that midwife, her name's Mika. She's really cool. But I said, in my last two births, while they can, from the outside, they seem like crazy and chaotic and whatever, my babies turned out fine and like nothing was actually wrong. Like I didn't need them. Like if they weren't, maybe my first, maybe, I don't know. But my second, I was like, truth be told, if she wasn't there, like everything would have been fine,
Right.
you know? And that's when I finally, I think, committed, like really committed, because I was already definitely going to do it. I think, like looking back, it's like obvious, but at the time I was just like, okay, I called this one midwife and I was like looking through Facebook groups and like, but, um, yeah, so I just continued to keep it a secret. And I didn't want people to, I knew no one could take me, like, could convince me not to do it. You cannot convince me to do anything. But I was like, I'm not going to fight people. I don't want to explain myself to somebody. And I don't think it's necessarily the most healthy thing to like keep it secret in a way that like I could have had more help in ways. But I just know the people in my life. I love them. They're amazing. They do so much for me. But I also know them and I know how they feel about things and how they see things and how they like to talk. And I get it. So it
And
was kind
those
of lonely. Yeah, you go ahead.
Those projections really do matter. Like they can make it or break it for some people. If you have
Mhm.
a friend or a family member who has a judgment, you can feel that, especially when you're
Mhm.
pregnant, your field is so sensitive. And so it's like you know that they're having that projection towards you, and whether you like
Mhm.
it or not, it's going to affect you. So I love how you kept this pregnancy secret. Like that's just you doing what you
Mhm.
can to make sure that these projections don't get in the way. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like Kylie Jennering it,
Yeah.
and it wasn't like, as fun. There's people that do it for fun, like to be like, surprise. No, I mean, mine was like trauma response. Like, that I am terrified of you to even, say anything and I would tell my husband constantly, you better not tell, you better. And he would come to me every couple of weeks, like, when are we going to tell your mom? I'm like, I don't know. And I would always, my motto was, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no, constantly. If it's not a hell, and a lot of people say full body yes. No, I was like, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And it was always not a hell yes. So, um, I randomly would take my blood pressure and like I took my blood sugar here and there, like just la la la. And then I just, after a while and everything was fine, I just said, okay, so this is, what am I doing here? And not that I think that there's anything wrong with it, but I just remember everything was fine. So I think I was doing it just to feel like I'm doing the right thing again. And so eventually I stopped. And it wasn't until um Christmas Eve that I told my mom I was pregnant and I was 38 weeks. And thankfully I did tell her that, because I was totally like once again expecting to go to 42 weeks. I didn't give the exact date, but I was 41 and 6 when I like gave birth to my second. I probably would have went a couple days longer if I didn't induce myself. So I'm thinking spontaneous labor, like I'm gonna go way later than that. I'm like 43 weeks, and I was really hoping not, because I was feeling it. I was feeling it outside of being sick. When I was getting to the end, I mean, she was like right on my cervix. She was so low. I had so many Braxton Hicks that pregnancy, which I love. I love I love all that. Now, oh, I'm not gonna skip into her labor just yet, but I was gonna say, like, I've had two different experiences with contractions, and I much prefer my first, because that's what Braxton Hicks feels like. They cover your whole stomach, but my second were all centralized, really low. But so I would have these Braxton Hicks, and I would just like really honor my body, like, we're preparing for this. Like, I didn't look at anything. I would try not to, like, towards the end. Obviously in the beginning I was like, oh, I don't want to be pregnant. Like, obviously I had a lot of shame feelings about wanting to end it, about not wanting to tell people about all these things. But I remember getting to a point, probably when I stopped doing the prenatal stuff as much, and I would ruminate. Like, I didn't think anything bad would happen necessarily, but I would always try to like think of, if something bad happened, how am I going to fix this? How am I going to, like, and I would ruminate, which ruminating isn't good. You go through it and like move on, right? And so I was feeling really like kind of depressed, like that just negative feeling. And I would tell myself, like, dude, even if something bad happens, like, what is being all upset right now going to do anything for it? Like, you need to enjoy your pregnancy, enjoy this time. And that's when I felt like I just started embracing a lot more towards the end. And I think that's what helped me eventually, like, tell my mom right before Christmas. And she
Excuse me,
was,
Lizzy. I'm gonna
so I remember being so terrified, but it was like ripping off a band-aid. I definitely had to get it. And I love my mother, just FYI. Like, she really is, outside of my husband, she's my rock. But I rely on her for a lot of help. Again, I knew I was free birthing, XYZ. It's just the inevitable conversations you have to have with people. But once I told her, and I ended up having the baby 2 weeks later. I gave birth the day after 40 weeks. I'm trying to eliminate due date from my vocabulary. But um where was I going with that? Hold on. Why did I say that? No, hold on. So I told her, no, I'm thinking like I shouldn't have diverged off like that. But oh yeah, I remember. So she would ask me, okay, this is what she would ask me. She asked like maybe 2 or 3 times in those 2 weeks. So like, are you gonna have people there? Or like, she would ask, basically she was asking if I had a midwife. Like, is how she wouldn't say like, do you have a midwife? But she would say it in a way where we knew what she was asking. And I would just tell her, I got everything I need. And that's always what I would tell her. I said, I got everything I need. And she knew. But thankfully, she just left me alone about it. Like she didn't keep pushing it. And I know there are people that deal with people that push it, and oh, I just don't know what I would have done. But I like the day or two before I went into labor, I remember being on the phone with her, like, do we need to be like ready to come get the boys or anything? I'm like, dude, I'm like 39 weeks or something. I'm like, I am gonna be pregnant for like 2 more weeks. Like, you're funny. I'm like, this, you're funny. Like as if I'm gonna go into labor in the next couple days. Like I really was in denial. And I actually love this. It was so much more fun to be in denial in early labor than being like, oh, let's go to the hospital or let's do this or let's call the midwives. So, yeah, 40 weeks comes around, and that's when, in like the evening, like 40 weeks on the dot, I start having contractions. I remember what started it. I did not have back labor, thank God. But the first contraction, it was so crazy. And I love, like, this is what I feel and I hear from spirit. Like, when I remember this feeling, I'm sitting on the chair watching Shrek with the kids, and I get one contraction in my back, like a knock. And to me, and then the rest were in the front, like from then on. And to me, like looking back, it's like the universe or my baby was like, knock, knock, like it's time, like it's so significant that one contraction to me because it was the only one. So it was really weird. I remember posting on my Instagram close friend story, like, I just had one contraction in my back, like, oh my gosh, you know. But anyway, so they were sporadic for the next because I was in for the next 6 hours. So labor was like total, I guess, from the first contraction, like 10 hours. But the first six, I was in total denial. They were like every 10 minutes, every 20 minutes. And my only so even though like at this point my mom knew and my stepdad and I think my aunt and like my sisters, like it was like maybe 10 family members knew, and it was like all my very close because I have a couple siblings. I have like four siblings, so they make up like half of it. But I have one sister who is my second, like closest to my age, and she's the only other person outside my husband in the whole world, like that I could, possibly trust to be in my birth space. Like at this point, I was like, no one, no one is allowed. Like I thought about hiring doulas too, like people that would support free birth, and I still didn't feel like I could trust that. But I knew I could trust my husband at this point, and I thought about like maybe calling my sister, and so I was on and off on the phone with her throughout basically the whole time, like the next 10 hours. And she would only be coming probably to like help with the kids and stuff. That's why I wasn't going to call my mom because I was like scared to have her in my space. But, but we just ended up just being on the phone here and there. So she was another support person throughout the labor, but I never ended up making her come. And it wasn't until 2 a.m. that I like is when active labor started, but it was right when I wanted to lay down. I had been up all the last couple hours, like handling the contractions, like being like, this could go on for days. I was told, just thinking this isn't nothing. This isn't real. That's why I kept telling her not to come. I just kept pushing it off. But then I think I took a shower and then I went to go lay down. And then they were coming every 2 minutes. I was like, you have got to be kidding me. Like I was okay with being in labor, but we did move 2 days later. Um, that's also why I was like really not trying to give birth right then, is because we were about to be switching apartments. And that's like a lot with three kids and one being a newborn and me being 2 days postpartum. We did manage it. It worked out. It was a lot. But so I think that was also why I was in denial. I was like, this is not the best time, little baby. But she didn't care. So me and my husband were up for over 24 hours at this point. Not at 2 a.m., but by the time she was born. I mean, and really it was just a very basic labor. But like I said, the contractions compared to my second, thank God his contractions were how they were. Because if I had a midwife telling her how centralized these contractions were, because they weren't on my scar, but they were just low. They felt like period cramps in my third labor. But in my second, it was like the wave. You hear people talk about the wave. It was like that. It would come from the bottom to the top. But excuse me. But not with my third. So it was very painful. It was different, a different type of pain, I will say. I mean, I was handling it, but I remember thinking like I remember telling myself, I will handle this and I will go through it as long as I have to. But gosh, am I ready for this to be over? And so active labor was thankfully only 4 hours. So I wouldn't call that precipitous by any means, but it definitely felt different than a full on 12 hours of like active every 2-minute contractions like my last. So, um, yeah, me and my husband were just up talking, and I very much like silence. I don't like playlists. I don't like music. I don't like talking. I don't like much touch, but I just used him as like my anchor when I was standing a lot. And then I did not really love being on my knees like how I did with my second. Like I didn't like being on the bed as much. I liked really standing. But I guess just at some point, even though I didn't love it, it wasn't like I was forcing my body to do something that I didn't like doing. But I just remember thinking that it's probably best I go get on the bed and get on all fours. I don't know. There's something told me to go get on all fours, and then soon I hit transition. So I don't
Mm.
know if it helped or it was just gonna happen. But I remember throwing up, and that's when, and then my water broke. It happened. It's just like textbook. It happened like within each other, like within 2 minutes of each other, something crazy like that. And I didn't have a ton of fluid or anything. She did end up having meconium, but we didn't know at the time. And thankfully we didn't. It was like 5 something in the morning because I don't know if we would have freaked out in that moment because we had like another 40 minutes till she was born. But my water broke. I throw up, and my husband, like, we have this all on camera. He's just like, I'm having like getting cold, getting hot, so he's putting a blanket on me, he's taking it off, putting socks on me, just little, very basic things. And yeah, I don't know, just she just starts coming out, when it's time. And I remember feeling, in my second birth, I was not in tune with much of anything. Like I have way too much external coming in, like way too much stimulation, ambulance people, all this stuff. So I couldn't feel, the things that I felt in my third birth because with her, I literally, like, I don't know how dilated I was. I don't know anything, there's no knowing. But the way I felt, I could feel myself open up. It was the coolest feeling the opening of my body for her. Um, it's almost like when I felt it, I was in sync. All of it was to my brain. I could just visualize it. I could see it. I could feel it. And she doesn't come out like within, held back, from like letting my body wanted to push her out real quick. Not like fetal ejection reflux, because that really will just do it on its own. But it was definitely wanting to go faster. But you can hold yourself back a little bit, and not in a way that's, if you're doing it autonomously and intuitively, women will know what I'm talking about. There's a way to kind of slow it down so you don't, because I did not want to tear a ton because I had tore so badly with my first. I just wanted to do what I could to like slow it down. And she eventually comes out. Like it took maybe one or two contractions for it to really just like finish. And yeah, she had meconium. That's something that none of my kids had. And I just remember she was definitely like I knew she was alive. Her cord was blue, like she was not like gray, but she was like I guess blue or purple, like I don't know. Like I was dark. I wasn't paying that much. Like it was like 6 o'clock in the morning. We had like barely any lights on. But it took her like a minute to cry. I've watched the video back and saw how long because it felt like 5 minutes at the time, but it took her one full minute to cry and she had meconium. And I just remember thinking like how effed our birth would have been if anyone else would have been there. If anything, I would not have
Mhm.
thought I would have meconium. You just think that these things aren't going to happen or these things aren't going to be present in your birth. And I remember thinking, thank God, because, oh, even when the water broke, we probably would have been at the hospital, you know, but it turned out great. She was amazing. And actually, one part I left out was my 1.5-year-old at the time woke up like 3 minutes, not even like right at that pushing phase, actually. And so I'm actually talking to him too in the video. I'm like, because he's kind of freaking out, like, and not even, he's not traumatized. He's totally fine, but he's like not really knowing what's going on. And he's kind of crying. And my husband's like trying to calm him down, but he's also trying to like watch me and like be there for me. And I'm on a mattress. So the baby's going to be fine, but he's also like not, I mean, he's going
He,
through it, my
he
husband.
could feel that that his sister was like about to come, right? Like he
Yeah.
could probably feel it.
Yeah, he screamed for a second when she came out, but then he was fine. And then 2 seconds later, like literally like right after she came out, my oldest, who was 2.5 at the time, woke up and came out. And it was the most, I mean, I got the afterbirth shakes really fast and stuff like that. But outside of that, like it was the most wholesome, I mean, healing experience for our family. Because as I mentioned, I was feeling like me and my husband were like on the verge of divorce the year before, because part of it was I felt like he didn't stand up for me or help me in the way I had, I guess, expected him to in those births. I've definitely see it different now because I understand this hierarchical system, and like men are not given the space to stand up for their women. Like, it's whatever. But when he was just there for me in this space, and he stayed up with me all night, he did everything I asked him to, which was basically nothing, which was amazing. That's what I wanted. I don't want anything really. I want you to just be there. Our marriage, like, my daughter is almost 9 months. Almost, she's 8.5 months. And I definitely want more babies. Not right now, but I will say outside of that, like, I love him more than I ever have. We've been together 11 and a half years. Our 8-year wedding anniversary was yesterday. And I'm not saying free birth solves people's problems or whatever, but I can tell you that those births is what affected our marriage, because I don't say we were perfect before, but we're back, if not better,
Mm.
now with 3 kids. It's hard, but we're so much more in love and in tune, and we can communicate better. And it's not perfect, but that did a big healing number for our family, having my kids and my husband, and with my new baby, and she was fine. Everything was fine. The placenta came out. Um, a little bit after I went to the toilet, and we didn't put a bowl in the toilet. I should have. I like literally just didn't give a crap. I was like, just get this thing out. And it just fell in the toilet. So we got rid of that. Didn't keep it. It's like, whatever. And then that's when I had my other placenta. I did take my placenta home from the second birth, but it was still in the freezer from like almost 2 years before. And I just didn't know what I was gonna do with it. I just, and he just threw it. We just threw him away. We're like, my next child, I definitely want to be a little more placenta focused. But I think every birth, I get a little more focused on different things, and you don't have to worry about as much as the other stuff. So yeah. But and then healing, just to like tap into that real quick, and then we can like I can answer any questions or whatever. Let me just say, I mean, I think I might have tore a little bit, but honestly, I think the only reason I could tell that was because I pushed my body. I knew I peed, but it was nothing. I mean, it was like a day or two, and that was it. And otherwise, my vagina felt amazing. Oh, did it turn? Was it not
No,
recording?
you're good. You're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I bring up that because my vagina felt terrible after my second birth, and I know how much of that is related to being on my back and the pushing and all the whatevers. But this time, the only thing that was sore, my whole body was sore. Okay. But not my vagina. And that was amazing. So I'm just saying that because it felt like I got beat up and ran a marathon. I don't know why, maybe just the adrenaline, just the way the blood coursed through my veins during that time. So I definitely felt like I needed a massage or like a chiropractor. But I was just so thankful. Like, it really healed a part of me too, because didn't mention this earlier. I experienced prolapse with my second because of the tear. And
Right.
that, outside of affecting my marriage and sex life, it just affected how I felt with my body. And so now it's not completely like healed, like I still kind of deal with it, but it's so different. Like, I feel more whole now. Like, I feel I'm me again, you know, for the first time, since before my cesarean. And in fact, I'm just a better me because I've learned so much from it all. But yeah, I'll stop talking now if you if you want to say anything.
Wow. Lizzie, I'm really bowing down to you. I cannot appreciate the amount of transformation that you've come through and moved through with so much grace. And this is a story of reclamation. This is a story of, unfortunately just doing what felt was right and then
Mhm.
giving your power away and allowing this authority to take over, and then you moving through this almost like a disassociation to
Mhm.
protect yourself, and you're like floating in the ethers, and then these midwives are coming in and taking advantage of that. And all the while, what I've noticed, this one current stream through your whole story is that maybe you were in a space of disassociation to mitigate too much trauma to the brain, but you always had this intuition. You always knew she was right there. You could feel her. You sensed her right there on your shoulder, close to your heart, like near your womb space. Like that knowing and that inner gnosis was always there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so glad that you held on to her. No matter what sort of trauma you were moving through, she didn't go too far away. So thankfully, there's this piece of inner gnosis and intuition that you're able to really lean into for the birth of your third child, and your daughter being this like total angel for the family to come in and just be like, okay, mama, time to get back into your body, into your power. Like totally claim all of this intuition instead of giving it away, right? Like, I'm so happy for you, and I'm really excited to see like the medicine that's going to come through future children. And
Mm-hmm.
um, your story is a reflection of what's happening to our earth and what's happening to our great mother, and how she's been beaten up and abused and like raped and gone through
Mm-hmm.
all this trauma. And then now we're in this place of women reclaiming their truth and
Mm-hmm.
reclaiming the power of the womb space, and how much magic is there when we actually do nothing at all, right? Like
Yeah.
when we're just held by the masculine, we're just held by our partners and people who
Mm-hmm.
believe in birth and believe in the feminine. Like your
Mm-hmm.
partner, your husband, he was just there, like putting your
Mm-hmm.
socks on, throwing the blanket off, taking it off,
Yeah.
putting it back on, the socks on and off, and like taking care of your other littles, right? Like that's all we
Mm-hmm.
need in the birth space.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then the rest is just pure magic. And it's not always rainbows and butterflies, right? But for
Yeah.
the majority of physiological undisturbed birth, it's pure magic, and it's so powerful. I'm so happy for you, and this story is just like a true reflection of what's going on the planet. And I have so much love for you after hearing this story. Like I feel so close to you, and like yeah,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, truly, thank
I
you.
love that. Now, I don't know if you know Emily Saldea, but she said some people after free birth, they either get a divorce or they have another baby. And I remember being like, please don't let it be a divorce. Please don't let it be a divorce. Cause I'm trusting him, in this birth. And I definitely, like I said, we don't want one just yet, but we want more kids. Like I have to go through that again. And it might not be the same, but oh, I just can't let that be the only time I have that experience. Like, and that's not why, obviously, kids are big responsibility, but you get me. We definitely have the urge to continue the story. And he tells people all the time. He tells people he delivered the baby, and I always correct him. You caught the baby. You were there. You were the best birth attendant. But I don't do it in angst. I'm like, I love that he tells people all the time that we had a home birth and there was nobody there and he was the doctor to be funny. And,
It was a
so
proud
help.
moment, and it was euphoric. And like if you go into if you break the word euphoria down, it means just well-being. Everybody there was well, and there was no hierarchy, there was no agenda. It's just trusting in the
Hmm.
biology of the woman's body. And I also feel like for him, like this is a story of reclamation. He probably, the reason why you're on the edge of divorce is because he witnessed his wife go through so much trauma, and he doesn't know what the heck to do about it, and probably is in this space of guilt and remorse. And like, that's really hard for the partner to see their lover like going through that. So to
Yeah.
come full circle in birth and autonomy and in peace is so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank
Oh.
you.
If there's anything, I mean, you've already shared so much wisdom, and you have offered all of the listeners that are tuning into this episode an incredible amount of information and wisdom. But is there anything else you feel like you want to share from your heart that would really benefit anyone in their preconception journey or in their pregnancy or healing from postpartum?
Uh, I think first evaluating how you talk about your birth story or how you talk about your plans or how you talk about what you think about how birth should look or what you think you should do. Um, I think when we evaluate how we speak, we can start talking to ourselves, have that positive self-talk or have those conversations internally. Like I'm talking to myself all the time. Like I really am constantly having these conversations with myself to try to work through things. And I've had some of my friends tell me they can see I have a lot of I can talk to myself in a way that works through things, and I think that's because I examine my language so much. So I don't know if that seems like a something even valuable to people, but as I said in the beginning, if we look back and say like I have to do this or I need to do this, catch yourself. I really, really recommend that to women because I think that's where we can begin. Like you said, our words are wands, and we have power. We have so much power, but it does begin with what we say. We're
Mm.
not going to think that we have autonomy if we're not speaking it. We're not going to think that we can, do X, Y, and Z if we're saying something different. And so as simple as that is, as non-birthy as that is, I think that goes so far.
I love it. Thank you. So, for those who are tuning in, just so thankful that you're here and hearing Lizzy's story. If you want to catch up with her a little bit more, you can find her on Instagram at the Lizzy Morris. And she has her Womanhood Project podcast, which is amazing and has so many beautiful stories. And so, thank you, Lizzy. I'm wishing you a really beautiful, beautiful night. And I hope that we get to chat again soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.